The recent terror attacks in Paris started a worldwide conversation about free speech. Everyone from presidents and heads of state to the Pope and top Muslim imams all speaking out to protect or criticize free expression. Immediately after the attacks, many of these world leaders converged in Paris to march together in the streets and show solidarity for the fallen victims. It was quite a mixture in that lineup. Rivals like Israel's Benjamin Netanyahu and Palestine's Mahmoud Abbas, leaders from Turkey and Russia to Ukraine and Egypt, and all the way in the back, one American ambassador wearing sunglasses, a large hat, and talking on her phone. Here in the United States, the White House felt so much heat from the criticism they even apologized and later sent Secretary of State John Kerry and 66-year-old musician James Taylor to hug it out and sing songs with the leaders of France. World leaders intended to display a show of courage and unity, but instead most people are confused and unsatisfied. For more on this story, we turn to journalist Patrick Henningsen. Patrick, it's great to have you back on the program.
Thank you, Gary.
Patrick, in your recent article on the 21st Century Wire, you exposed several hypocrisies in the Paris Unity March. First off, the strange mix of world leaders in the crowd. Do we even know if all of them were marching for the same cause?
Well, we initially looked at this lineup, this distinguished lineup of world leaders locking arms, marching together in solidarity, as it were. But when you take a closer look at who is there, and you look at the records of each of these respective countries, we then called this, well, a march of hypocrisy. So je suis hypocrite, as they say in France, starting with, not least of all, you have Saudi Arabia, you have Bahrain, you have Turkey. These are countries that routinely jail journalists and in some cases torture them and worse. And these are all obviously very good allies of Washington, D.C. Moving on, we have Great Britain, which is increasingly enacting more draconian laws to try to strangle the press in the light of Rupert Murdoch's phone hacking scandal. The Leveson inquiry set up to try to regulate the press, if you can believe that, and many other countries throughout Europe. Certainly in the wake of the Snowden NSA revelations, we would put the United States in one of the biggest offender categories if you talk about the war on whistleblowing. This particular president, Barack Obama, has been particularly vociferous against freedom of the press. Associated Press's offices were raided, if we don't forget that incident which happened around a year ago, and that was to get a hold of the sources that AP had of a story which they broke about a Yemeni suicide bomb squad which had a CIA double agent heading that terrorist group. And John Brennan was very keen to shut that story down. So they sent in, Eric Holder sent in, and the DOJ rubber stamped it to raid the offices of Associated Press. That's a mainstream story. Also, we have General James Cartwright, who blew the whistle to the New York Times about Stuxnet, the Stuxnet virus, and other programs, Flame and so forth, and he was indicted under the Espionage Act. You have Jeffrey Sterling, you have John Kiriakou. We have a number of these people who are really persecuted for whistleblowing and journalists brought to book. And Cheryl Atkinson from CBS News, she's chronicled some of these other similar incidents in her work recently. So we have a situation here where the debate is around freedom of speech, freedom of the press, but it's not really. You can argue about what Charlie Hebdo magazine in Paris is or was, whether it's a journalism or political cartoon. Some people might call it political pornography. But whatever that is, it's certainly this whole kumbaya moment, which was tried to create in Paris on the Sunday after the attacks, was really a case of political opportunism, in our opinion.
Well, now, it's not every day that we hear the White House apologize for something, but missing from this event, they weren't there, and they got a lot of criticism for that. So from what we've seen in recent days out of the White House, does the Obama administration care about making friends or enemies around the world? Was it more of an oversight, or do you think it was intentional for them not to be there?
Personally, I think it was intentional. The one thing is that this administration doesn't want people to point the finger at its own record of strangling press freedom. and freedom of speech in this country. So in terms of the amount of scandals that you have and cover-ups already with this administration, the last thing they want is people to go through a fine-tooth comb with all the incidents, which we have done at 21st Century Wire. But beyond that, I think it was a bit odd, Gary. There's a lot of people who've got different ideas of why a U.S. Representative or head of state was not present at that meeting, but that was a very politicized event in Paris. Okay, so it was meant to be about the people. It was meant to be about mourning the loss of the fallen or the people who died, victims of the attack, the people's solidarity, and it was quickly hijacked by politicians who.
So what were they marching for? What were those politicians marching for? Were they marching for free speech? Were they marching for a photo op? I mean, clearly you just outlined the hypocrisies and back in their own countries. But what were they marching for?
They were marching for a photo op, and if you look at the actual photographs of that event, there's one shot which shows an aerial shot where they marched and they formed the politicians' column, if you will, into a triangular shape, so that when they shot it from the ground level, looking towards Angela Merkel, who was in the middle, it looked like they were leading the whole march of millions of people, and there was only a couple of hundred people there on the street. In the way that they did the camera angles, I mean, it smacks of a staged photo op. And that was one of the most disappointing things when I saw that aerial shot, to see that they were really trying to create an image that these are the world's great and the good, and that the millions of people are behind them in Paris, and this kind of platitudes and so forth that we normally see these people spouting all the time, when in fact they're some of the biggest offenders with regards to our freedoms and liberties.
Well, ironically, on the same day as the Unity March, New York Times reporter James Risen was forced to testify about how and where he got inside information from the CIA. Many reporters have accused the White House of cracking down on free speech. Are there any world leaders out there who openly encourage or accept dissenting opinions?
It's not easy to find, Gary. It's not easy to find. You're absolutely correct. The timing of that event, and of course the James Risen case, would normally have been front and center in the headlines, by the way, if the attacks in Paris did not take place. In the United States, that James Risen story might have risen to the top of the headlines and then dominated the national conversation for a period of 48 or at least 72 hours, and allowed that sort of issue to be fleshed out. But the bottom line with that case, Gary, is that the government wants to put forward the notion that the CIA can do no wrong. And so they've used Jeffrey Sterling, I believe, as a scapegoat, really, for that whole affair. And it's really getting us away from the real conversation, which is that in a country that is a free democracy, a constitutional republic like the United States, we should have a free press. And if a story is within the public interest, then the people have a right to know about it. But they're trying to put these layers of classification over it, or this is, classified CIA. It's not really in the public interest to know about these things, national security letters and so forth. But the bottom line is there's a lot of things going on in the intelligence services, and that are actually, it's a bit of foul play. Certainly with the AP raid and John Brennan's connection with that, the Yemeni terrorist bomb, suicide bomb cell, that's absolutely in the public interest to know we've got double agents out there running point on so-called terrorist groups.
Now, what's the difference between a CIA operative and a White House staffer? One is allowed to leak information to the press all the time. The other one loses his job or could actually see life in prison. There's obviously a lot of classified information traveling through the halls of Washington. Should the government be allowed to punish whistleblowers?
Well, look, General James Cartwright is the highest-ranking U.S. official to ever be indicted on the 1917 Espionage Act, okay? And all he did was talk to the New York Times about a story that was already in the public domain. And then the federal government's coming there, basically handcuffing one of our most decorated military generals, who was Obama's chief military advisor for a long period of time, for something that's already in the public domain. So that's just bullying and intimidation, and then trying to get, is the government trying to get in and manage journalists at the New York Times or the press. It's wanting to get in and micromanage it from remote control, if you will. And that's all the Cartwright affair was. But, the Stuxnet flame virus, I mean, covert operation to hack into Iranians' civilian nuclear facilities and Russian facilities, came out later. Then that's quite a dangerous little operation to be doing behind the scenes, because if anything goes wrong, what if a reactor goes into meltdown? You have a fallout Chernobyl situation or something like this. So the Cartwright said, we need to make this, I need to help make this public. And I don't think that was a bad thing.
Now, Patrick, President Obama, let's go back to Paris now. President Obama sent John Kerry to Paris with James Taylor to embrace free speech and to build bridges. What was he thinking by pulling that kind of a move?
That is just, I'm frankly speechless. It's an astonishing move by what many have already characterized as one of the most, nondescript secretaries of state in the history of the United States. John Kerry seems to be in a Jobsworth situation there in the State Department. So, attaching yourself to pop stars or, 60s icons like James Taylor, trying to create some sort of a PR stunt. Again, this is a politician who is someone his aides or staff or someone at the White House dreamed up this brilliant idea. Hey, this is going to be a great photo op. James Taylor. Oh yeah, I'm a big fan.
Well, how come they didn't send, say, the Insane Clown Posse?
That's a valid argument, Gary. I'm surprised that it wasn't Jay-Z, doing a hip hop concert. But there you go. It's just a ridiculous thing, and it does lower the stature of the U.S. State Department when these sort of publicity stunts happen. It doesn't help the stature of the United States government. It's already struggling to be relevant on the world stage and to be seen as a leader. A move like that is it's not good.
All right, Patrick, we're almost out of time, but let's talk about the NSA spying and Edward Snowden. He revealed a lot of truth in the last couple of years. If he comes back to the United States, he would almost certainly wind up in a jail cell. What kind of internal environment do you think that creates in government agencies? Are government employees more or less likely to tell the truth to the public?
Absolutely less likely. This definitely put a chilling effect on whistleblowing. That was the main reason why Bradley Manning, or Bradley Chelsea Manning, they threw the book at him basically, and he's languishing in a federal facility right now because they wanted to make an example out of him. Everything that was leaked to WikiLeaks from Manning was pretty much already out in the public domain. I mean, it's really old news. The most incendiary thing was a video of a Black Hawk helicopter mowing down unarmed people outside of Baghdad, I believe, or in Iraq. And so, they're trying to say that this harms national security in America. And I think that's a very difficult point, tenuous thing to try to argue. The fact is there's a chilling effect on whistleblowing. That's why they're made examples of. That's why they will not relent with Edward Snowden either. He will remain persona non grata as far as the U.S. government is concerned, maybe for the duration of his life, or at least for another 20 years or something like this. So I hope that's not the case, but it sure looks like they're not budging on the Snowden issue. All
right, Patrick, thanks for joining us today.
Thank you.
That was journalist Patrick Henningsen. You can find out more about him at 21stcenturywire.com. Up next, we've got today's special reports and Amanda Gabriel standing by with your daily digital report. You're watching WHDT.